I think we'll start. So, Chris, on my right, Chris Potts, who, if you've been at the conference, needs no introduction, but for those of you who haven't, Chris, introduce yourself and give us a story.
Just like that?
Yes.
I will.
Just like that.
So I'm Chris. I'm an independent professional mentor, trainer, speaker and writer. I specialise in enterprise investment, which is the artful combination of enterprise architecture and investment portfolio management. That's what I do. That's what I help people with. So my story is about how your market, whatever market you're in, can figure out how good you are at enterprise architecture. Because I can, you see. I can help people, and I do this, is if I can get to your business results over a period of time, I can figure out, using ratios I learned from investment specialists, that this enterprise is either really good at the moment at enterprise architecture or it's not. Okay? And it's a period of time thing. I can tell if it's decaying or growing, and I don't actually have to know anything about it, apart from possibly what it does. So if you're an enterprise that makes hamburgers and you're there to make a profit over a period of time, I can use published ratios, we can use published ratios as market people to figure out if you as the hamburger company are getting better or worse at enterprise architecture. So that's my inside out, upside down, whichever the other one was, story.
That wasn't really a story, that was a sales pitch.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a story about
Sales pitch. How many people thought that was a sales pitch?
See, not very
Yeah,
many.
there we are. So now tell us the story.
That was the story.
Well, give us the last client you talked about. Give us a story, like kind of give us a narration around the last client you kind of looked at, and you looked at in this sort of prism you've got, or this thing, and give us some insights. Give us some deep kind of passion.
Bear with me, I can't talk about clients because I'm on all sorts of non-disclosures. And I apologise for that. That is my job. That's because,
well, I'm not asking you to tell you the client. I'm asking you to give a story about a generic client. Don't tell them name.
Okay.
So give us some, because what you do is fascinating. The idea that you can come in and see a company without knowing anything about them except what they do, and actually over time track their competence at this stuff. This is interesting. So dig deeper. Give us a case study that we don't want names. Just tell us what happened and how you did it and what was the result. You know, what did they benefit from your intervention?
Okay, thank you. So, transaction processing organisation. That's what they do for a living.
Yeah.
And they want to make profits over the world by processing transactions. You don't have to know any more than that, as long as you can get to their business results online and do it over a period of about 7 to 8 years, which is what I did. Right. At the time I'm talking about, I was working with a chief operating officer, and as they had no enterprise architects called enterprise architects, he was the chief architect of that enterprise.
Right.
And so I was inside and outside at the same time, and inside and outside. And so they were sort of thinking, perhaps, because they've been growing through acquisition, that sometime soon they might have to do something with their architecture, as you and I would call it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's all sort of like, yeah, we think we have to. So we pulled out the reports and accounts and all the other things from the years. We did the simple ratios that if you know how to do the simple. And so you see, that's why we have to do something with enterprise architecture. And it was to do with, because they'd acquired companies to grow over a period of time, that they had become less and less efficient at what they do. That's a common story with enterprises that do that. And so what we had to do is start thinking about how you could now use enterprise architecture techniques and enterprise architecture skills to increase the efficiency of the enterprise as it continues to grow. That's one part of the story. But the common story about all of these kinds of enterprises that are going through acquisition is there is a good time and a bad time to do this.
Right.
So we know from the data that their ability to do their own architecture is not good, and it's causing decay in the efficiency of the organisation as a whole. We can do that. But there's a political angle in which if the chief operating officer at the time had gone to the chief executive and said, we're not doing very well architecturally, here's the numbers, so we need to change, he'd have timed it completely wrong. So there was a timing thing based on the inside outside down to say, when is it time to actually reveal to anybody what we know about our architectural abilities based on all the numbers we can do. And it turned out the time was about 2 years' time.
Okay.
Okay. So now, what do you do now for 2 years as an enterprise architect? You just go on with the journey, or you go away and come back in 2 years' time. You see, that's probably better when there's actually some work to do.
So you're saying the political climate is one of the most important factors to triggering enterprise architecture?
The most important.
The most important
factor,
thing.
yeah.
Okay, over and above efficiencies and measurements.
Well, we can measure that stuff. That's how well
Yeah.
the structure is doing.
Yeah.
You can calculate that. But
Okay.
the political climate is the important factor.
Okay, well that's a useful insight.
Thank you for
the outside in. No, it's as architects we tend to talk waffle, high-level bullshit most of the time.
Did I just
It's
do
a problem. Yes, that's what you did at the beginning.
Thank you, that's
and so
can
we've
take
got
that.
to ground this
I can
stuff
take that.
in stories and a sense of reality. Forgive me. I mean, I know well enough that you can take.
How broad the shoulders are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that was a great story. And
Thank
actually,
you.
this political climate, we'll come on to that. I'm trying to seed thoughts, discussions here. As I say, we're not the experts, but what this idea is to sort of warm the thing up. It's a bit like the warm-up band, so that we can actually get some really good discussion going a bit later. Yes?
What was that key ratio that you...
There was more than one. Always use more than one. So in that case, there was 2 we used. Even two is not enough, but it started to tell the story. In that case, it was a simple ratio of revenues over operating costs. That they called it something. They said the jaws are closing. And they knew this. You see, they knew the jaws are closing because if you divide revenues by operating costs, you get less productive. You do it the other way around, it's efficient. And then, what are they in business to do? What's the whole structure there to do? To create profits by doing transactions all over the world. So profit per transaction is a key, and that again, the jaws are closing, if you like. Yeah. So, and actually, even 2 is a bit dangerous, but we're getting somewhere. You see, you can do that without being part of the enterprise. That's it. So, yeah.
How many people as EAs actually measure what they're doing in terms of measurements like this? No. Okay, interesting. It's an odd nod and a kind of wink, but no hands going up. So that's useful, isn't it? We don't actually measure what we're talking about here too much, yeah? And obviously Chris does from the outside, so watch out, he's coming to get you. Great, good start. Thank you, Chris. So we now move to Casper. I'm not going to give you nearly such a hard time, Casper, because I don't know you very well. I've only just met you.
Thanks.
But Casper, do introduce yourself and give us a funny or interesting or radical story about upside down, inside out, and back to front.
Okay, my name is Kasper Randrup, and I'm from Denmark. I have my own little company called Future Rocks, where I work with digital transformation. I've been working within this area of change for the last 20 years, and primarily in the financial sector. So when I heard that I need to come up with a story, I was thinking about the previous places I've been working and how could I sum up some of those dilemmas I've seen there. So I'll try to make a short fictive story based on real life. So imagine that you're working in a company where the focus on tactical solutions and quick wins has entangled the entire business ecosystem to such an extent that it's very hard to deliver business value at the right time to market. And where good people around the organization is floating around in new technologies, and they're dreaming about all the great things they can achieve with that. But at the same time, in the background, there's a monster lurking around. And it's called legacy. You know that? It's constructed of old technology and complex business processes. So, in this company, the strategy department, they've just outlined the new vision and the business goals for the entire company in their own wording, you could say. So they at least understand what it's about. And in the IT department, there's a couple of enterprise architects. They've been doing a lot of as-is and to-be work, proving for how we should change the application portfolio. And they have a lot of artifacts proving for why that's a good idea. And then, lastly, in the portfolio office, they have filled their portfolio with projects, and they're defined by CXOs from different areas of the organization. Is that something you can recognize?
Yeah.
A little bit? Yeah. So what is happening is that most of this is running in parallel without any synchronization. So it's kind of hard doing a change in such an organization. But I think that in my perspective, what I have done is move enterprise architecture closer to strategy. In Denmark, we see a lot of initiatives with people going agile with the SAFe framework, and that makes the organization work even closer together, melting together, you could say. And in that way, EA is moving closer to strategy and the whole portfolio discipline. And I think that's the right place for EA to be if we are talking about making value in the future. So by turning it inside out and upside down and all that, I think that we should do an effort to move EA closer to strategy and do less of the IT EA, I would call it, because we have a lot of that. I have done a lot of that. But to really bring the value to the companies, we need to make EA more like a strategic business capability.
All right, thank you. Very good. So yeah, so is that what is that? Is that upside down, inside out, back to front?
I don't know. For me, it is at least. I think that the upside down is that we need to change the way we're doing EA,
yes,
the way we're practicing it,
and make architecture more up than down.
Yeah, more up than down. Yeah,
okay.
Totally. Yes.
And attach it more to the business and not to IT.
Yeah.
Great.
Because
okay,
that's where the real value is.
Excellent. So we've had an outside-in view from Chris and an upside-down view. I'm not going to squeeze Sally to get the third one, but thank you very much, Casper. Sally, introduce yourself and perhaps a short story.
Okay, I'm Sally Bean. My career is sort of one third doing business systems architecture in a large British airline, and about 2/3 being an independent consultant advising other organisations on their enterprise architecture effort and practice. And recently I've been concentrating a lot more on the people side of enterprise architecture, and that's the area that really interests me. But my story goes a long way back to the airline, and I'll choose this for a number of reasons. One of them being it's the only piece of work I've ever been awarded a prize for. And it had to do with baggage performance. It was a business theme. The problem with baggage performance, it was so bad, so many bags being lost, that they had appointed a manager in charge of lost bags. Or worldwide baggage performance. And he'd decided that one of the answers had to be to invest more money in giving them a better bag recovery process. But we took a very strong outside-in view, so we spent a lot of time interviewing all the people that had anything remotely to do with bags. We went to all the terminals, we followed a bag around the terminals, spoke to the people who did lost bags, and then we did some analysis of the systems, how they were supporting things, and you won't surprise you, we drew a little 4-box model, which was plan, operate, recover loss, recover poor performance, and then feedback. So it was a circular model, and then we mapped all the systems and problems onto this model. And it wasn't that difficult to convince him it'd be better to invest in not losing the bags in the first place. And so there were various systems and databases so we changed the whole idea of what he wanted to spend his money on. And we supported that argument with a set of cartoons, a before and after, with sort of dire stories of people, customers and people in overalls in the building, and then what happened afterwards. And then every thought bubble in the first set of things says, we don't know. We don't know where the bag is, we don't know when it's going to arrive. And the second lot of thought bubbles was all about what the investments were going to be, what effect they would have, and how the voices in thought bubbles would change. So this was presented to the head of customer services. He said, I understand this is great. So I got some good, well, the team, there were 4 of us on it, got some good brownie points. So it was a bit outside in, because we were looking at it from the outside first, and then back to front, because we reversed the what he was going to invest in. Instead of investing in the downstream, you're going to invest more in upstream. So I think in that sense.
Fantastic. So you got 2 of the ideas in. Well done, Sally. And you rounded it out nicely because we hadn't had a back to front story. So there we are. That's the end of the first part. We're not going to take an intermission because we haven't got enough time. But we're now going to break out into a sort of discussion, really. Take some of the stories, take some of the points, elaborate on them, and let's have a few hands in the air for people who want to kick off. Otherwise, we'll go back to the panel. Yes, down here. Very kindly volunteered to rove the mic. And by the way, you can ask a question roving the mic as well if you want. Say who you are and what you do.
Okay. Paul Stevens. I come from a company called Uniper, who generate power in this country and across Europe. I'm a newbie in terms of EA. For the last 10 years, I've been an infrastructure architect. I'm working at the enterprise level. And I've never known where to actually couch EA. And it sort of swings in a pendulum. Is it IT or not IT? That's my question. I picked up with Chris yesterday that it could be a constraint. But I'm sort of, when I actually look at it about where you actually position EA in the industry, is it more what I see from you in terms of the Sir John Harvey Jones type role, if you go back in time, the troubleshooter, or is it what I learned over 10 years ago, actually being an IT consultant?
Good question, thank you. Great one to kick off. Chris.
Okay, Paul, thank you for that. As you were with me yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So this is something you've seen that other people haven't seen, is that when you look at the tangible aspects of the architecture of an enterprise, you're looking at the way people are organised, the way money is organised, and the way technologies are organised. Now, depending upon the reasons that things could be made better from an architectural point of view, it could be all of those 3 things we need to change. It could be just the money structure, and the technology and people structure is okay, and so on. So if you know about technology, that's a tangible thing, as long as you can talk tangible with people that don't really care. They talk about money and people. So the question is, EA, is it about IT? Yes. Is it about people? Yes. Is it about money? Yes. And the money one is often the blind spot for people who get involved in enterprise architecture. The money structure of an enterprise, whether it's government, charity, or a commercial enterprise, is essentially the structure to know. All right, and now then the people structure and technology structure as well, but the money structure is usually the blind spot. All right, so whether you're sitting in IT, when I used to sit in IT, I still sit in IT when I go and work with clients. To be honest, I don't really care. If I feel I have permission and given myself permission to go and talk to anybody about anything, we'll figure out what the money structure is, the people structure is, and the technology structure is. I do the same if I'm sitting in finance or HR anyway. Okay, but there is a blind spot for EA if we're not careful, because we can talk technology structures and maybe people structures, while a lot of people that we're trying to influence are probably concentrating on the money structure.
In your case, what do you think the sort of struggle you have is in terms of finding this fit?
I suppose I'm new to it. I've looked at infrastructure for
Right.
a long time
Yeah.
in terms of how it can enable the business, because you have to have good infrastructure to actually deliver to the future. And when I look at things, it's more about over a 5 to 10 year period. So legacy, totally understand.
Yeah.
And legacy's there. I've seen some nice presentations today. I saw one about Barclays earlier. Yeah, I've got a relative who works in Barclays and they still want loads of COBOL. So, it's those are things I've looked at. So it's more about where it positions itself. I looked at it into the TOGA model covers application, data, and business. But at the moment, in terms of IT, I see it really looking at the applications and the data side of it.
Yeah, I must admit, I have an application architecture background, and I always look at it through that lens in terms of applications, data, and process. And I think processes, are the kind of things that through which the lifeblood of the company flows. And unless you have a good view, it's a lens, it's not the only lens, you know, on that area, it's very difficult to relate it back to the business. So you know, that's another aspect. You know, you have financial systems, that's where the money flows through. You have operational systems where the operations all get checks and balances. You have the sales and marketing systems where the deals are all being lined up. And these all have flows. We have deal flow, you know, we have cash flow. You know, flow, we used to have data flow diagrams in the old days, but they kind of got lost somewhere. And I think flow is a fundamental attribute to how a business works. And if you look at businesses that don't work very well, there are always blockages to flow. And I think understanding flow is also a key attribute, and it's a key part of kind of having the dynamic sense, because EA can get very static, and you've got to bring, you know, that dynamic aspect of EA into the equation as well. But that's my view. Casper, what do you think about this? Fine question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've seen EA being placed all the way down to infrastructure and all the way up to strategy. And myself, I've been often working in the IT department. And I think EA is about connecting disciplines and make the company deliver on their strategy in the best way, harvesting that value they want to go for. So personally, if I should choose a place or spot, and it has to be inside of IT, for example, it will be at the portfolio if that's placed in IT, because there you will have the strategic direction, you will have what initiatives are going to be started in the company. You can form the high-level architecture for the IT and the technology, and you can actually look downstream, how is the project actually performing. You can look upstream in the pipeline, what projects are coming, or you can put in projects or enablers if you're running safe into the portfolio. And you actually are in the center of where change and strategy is focused. I think that's very essential. Otherwise, you just sorry to say, an application architect or something else, and that's fine. But if you have a focus that's enterprise-wide, I think you should be placed where you have that mandate or that view of things.
Have you thought of opening up a discussion with your strategy guys? Do you have that open at the moment?
We're a fairly new team.
No, that's okay.
Yes, so yes. Yeah, that's the issue. We will be.
Yeah, because I mean, giving yourself permission to actually go and talk to other parts of the business is a key part of being an EA. And you find people who come up through the tech world aren't necessarily that good at banging on doors and saying, hey, I do enterprise architecture. And they say, what on earth does that mean? And you have to explain what it means. But breaking down those doors and talking to the right people in the company, because they're not going to come to you on the whole, because they don't know who you are and where you sit and everything else. So a key part of EA to me is breaking down those doors and going and getting yourself out there. Chris?
Can I comment on that? Because I mean, it's interesting because we can create the doors in the first place if we're not careful. Another brief story about a workshop I ran with a company over in mainland Europe. A group of enterprise architects from a global company. We did a constraints workshop for a couple of days. What's constraining us from having the impact we wanted to have? And one of the things they said is nobody seems to know where EA stops and everything else starts. And I said, well, that's good then. Because the worst thing we want to do is sort of delineate where EA stops and everything else starts, because now we created the door we now need to break down to get through. So how about we just decide that we're all there, everyone's an architect unless we find out otherwise, and we're just going to walk in and sit down and join in with people and do the valuable thing that we do, and if it's still fluffy where we stop and they start, fantastic. Don't create the barrier by thinking it's a constraint that people don't seem to know whether the line is drawn between us and them. Good. Now we can go anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. This is to get EA redefined. You know, whatever it's been in the past, you have a chance to redefine it, and that's whether you're new to it or not. Yeah. Question there. Sorry.
My view on EA is that essentially it's about making boundaries work better. So whether those are boundaries between technology, data, process, business strategy, but those vertical boundaries, or making sure data working better across the organisation. It's working across boundaries as opposed to. So enterprise infrastructure architecture is infrastructure, but enterprise architecture is all those different dimensions working better together.
And there is a role for EA, picking up on Casper's point, where we can slip in when there is no strategic planning or very little strategic planning process. And that gives us a shoe-in to that process. So I've been setting themes, strategic themes, for the company I work for, and that now feeds into the investment planning process. Because someone else is driving the investment planning process,
That's right.
we have a role in that to drive that investment planning process around those strategic themes which we've highlighted.
I know some people want to talk. I just want to say, I was in a talk earlier today about that. I didn't do the talk, I was in the audience, and I spoke to the person afterwards. There's a point at which, if you do outcomes-driven EA, which you need to do, if you haven't got outcomes-driven investment portfolio management, at some point your EA is going to struggle. And that's an important thing. We're not here to do investment portfolio management if we're enterprise architects, but we might have to redesign how it's done so that we can succeed. So I just wanted to say that because that's the link. Thank you. Sorry, Oscar.
I think getting yourself into the position where you've got allies as well within any political structure is important. I mean, clearly, you're just to describe, is it Andrew? I can't remember.
Oh, yes. Oh, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew. Andrew's case there where, he's obviously got himself to a position where he can talk to the strategy guys and be part of that strategic theme setting is key. And there are other parts of the organisation, Sally was talking about people, you can get close to HR and organisation designers and people like that, but finding out different parts of the organisation where you break out of traditional IT and become friends with people who are thinking more in terms of the long term is critical as well. Any thoughts on this before we move to the next question? There was a man, yes, sorry, we'll come to you there.
Hi, my name is René Koch. I happen to work for the same company.
Oh, okay.
But I would call myself a seasoned enterprise architect.
Okay.
And my experience is when I was still a consultant, it was much easier to accomplish what you just said. You come in, you're hired for a specific problem, and then people want to get that done because they're paying ridiculous amounts of money for you every day. So then they don't have a problem if you cross organizational boundaries, ask tricky questions about financials and everything else. And that works quite well. And I think the reason this is different when you're inside an organization is twofold. One is that you're staying there, you will not go away once the problem is solved. So it's really an issue about power. If someone is sharing financial information with you, then this is also giving away some power because it might make you look bad it enables to compare performance across different departments. The other thing is, my experience is that really doesn't scale. Like as a consultant, I used to have like smaller things, like now we're looking for an entire company. And my observation, and this was also something that came through in the Shell presentation earlier today, the larger the organization gets, the worse it is. And I think that's what you also said with the different CXOs, or the Shell presentation was about, we have business architecture, we have Six Sigma, we have operational excellence, and ideally that should all be part of enterprise architecture in our world. So in the TOGAF it really says like all power comes from business, and you have this architecture board which should completely be represented with business people. But in practice, enterprise architecture, let's face it, is a concept that has emerged in IT. So this is why you also, as an enterprise architect in organizational structure, typically report to the CIO. Also, the CIO doesn't always have an interest that you think outside of the IT box and go into the marketing. Now, my hope, after everything what I've heard today, is that as part of the digitalization, that culture is stirred up a little bit. I believe that the future there is that you will have to divide the company in smaller cross-functional groups and talk about things, because that's, for me, is the only way how you can bring business and IT together and make them innovate. And because you cannot fundamentally change business architecture if you take the business architecture for given and then start the discussion within the confines of that existing structure.
I think that's really good points in there, and I think this whole struggle with defining what we are in relation to some of these other things like Six Sigma and everything else is absolutely key. But making friends with those groups is also key. But I just like one point you made about cross-functional stuff. I think cross-functional stuff is great so long as everyone's clear where the boundaries are within the company and what the functions are responsible for. And I've seen cross-functional initiatives break down because everybody gets too much in the soup of nothingness in the middle. And it's very important that each function is strong in their own right and they have systems that support their function properly. And you worry about the interfaces between those systems rather than the systems themselves. And I think as an EA, you're looking for flow between the functions or between the various sort of sub-parts of the business, rather than getting into the solutions architecture, which is actually within the function itself.
I think I moved from an enterprise architecture for continuing operations and cost cutting, which is what we are currently doing mainly. I'm fully with you. But when I'm thinking about the digitization topic and about disruptive business models, that does not happen if you stay inside the existing functional breakdown. But also on the other hand, like a company the size of ours of Uniper or like let's say Centrica, Prudential, you cannot say, okay, like we all now sit down and make disruption. You have to coordinate it in a way. So somehow it's like yin and yang. You have to find the right balance there.
Yeah, Chris.
I'll say this briefly. What we're here to do, as I understand it, as we're enterprise architects, is to understand the architecture of the market or markets in which our enterprise looks to succeed, and make sure the flow between the enterprise and the market or markets is working. Because markets have architectures. It doesn't sort of stop at the boundary of an enterprise or business. And that's that flow we're here to try and make better. Organisational structures are the politics, the budgets of the politics, if you like, and so on, that we have to operate within, but it's the flow between the enterprise and the market architecture that's in, that we are here to try and sort of articulate to people what we can do better. And then the tricky bit is to make sure we take some accountability for it working. Okay, in which then the organisational structure and things are the challenge we have to face. That's what I would say.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, time for another question. Yeah.
This was still under discussion.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great.
EA, I think it was John Zachman who actually put it pretty well, that there's no doubt that EA should be in the business because it's about the enterprise. But the reason that we're almost always in IT is because of the way of thinking. That IT people have this structured way of addressing problems and viewing things that makes this type of thinking and this type of work natural for these types of people. So they emerge from IT, but basically the business need these people to be in the business rather than level above that.
That's interesting.
In practice, when you're now sitting in IT, I found a way to I think it's a little bit what Chris is saying. What I did was I drew an EA organization myself. I had it, I didn't show anybody, but I acted as if the whole enterprise were my enterprise. And then I say, well, who would I discuss this with? People, the infrastructure, etc. And I built my own organization within the organization, and I acted as if that was the organization I was working in. And
so
that works pretty well.
You made yourself a self-appointed CEO.
So I was the CEO of EA.
That's right.
Everybody else was working for me more or less. And I think that works pretty well.
I can clarify that. It's because Imagine an enterprise has no enterprise architect with a capital E and capital A. They'll still make architectural decisions, they'll still make architectural investments. It doesn't mean they're making good ones, but they might be. So the job of formalised enterprise architecture is to understand how good the enterprise already is at making architectural choices and investments, and then add in the bit that we can do, being formalised enterprise architects, that makes it even better. So hence the approach in which you've got to, I am the sort of, you'll work for me now. It's sort of, yeah, as long as we're careful politically. But I understand that one. That's the one to take. So they, we know about enterprise architecture. So in some ways, we have to lead other people who do it.
There's a mindset thing there, though, which I like, is you're actually stepping up, which we were talking about earlier on, and taking a bigger role than just being boxed in.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the outside in. You can then project yourself outside and give some leadership. Because when you get to these positions, you're actually a leader. You're trying to lead people forward to the vision of what the new architecture is going to look like. And unless you think of yourself as a leader and not as a sort of servant, which many of the IT functions traditionally have looked at, then you're not going to make it. But that's a really, really good point. Yes, we've got someone here. Yeah.
I think these are all very good points. I think understanding what your mandate is can sometimes constrain you.
Yeah.
And I think breaking out of that mindset is very helpful. One of the things which I keep promising myself I'll explore in more detail, but haven't yet, but I'll just throw it out, is that I think fundamentally the people who rise to power in organizations are those people who deliver. And they rise to power because they get things done. And people who deliver don't tend to be, I wouldn't say would never be, but don't tend to be people who sit back and plan and think and model and act like enterprise architects or architects in that sense. And I think there's this cultural difference between people who hold the reins of power in organizations that really create some separation between EA and I think the challenge is how to overcome, how to present value to people whose mindset is very different to your own.
Sally.
We've actually talked about this.
Well, good. We'll open it up, because this is Sally's specialist subject.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
yes, it's very noticeable that there are I've taken a lot of interest in personality. And I've been looking at the typical personality of an architect, and there are some archetypes. And interestingly, there's an archetype that is much more interested in the conceptual side and the modelling side than they are about getting on and actually delivering stuff. There are other people who are more, I found, more delivery kind of orientated and determined to push things forward. And they get stuck in a different way because they've got their view of what's right, so that they're quite competitive. So you've got two sorts of people: the sort of people who want to come up with blue skies sort of picture of the future, and then the people who want to get on and do something and aren't very good at selling it. So that's an area that I'm taking quite a lot of interest in. So if anybody else is interested in that, these personality differences and how that affects people effectiveness, please come and have a chat.
And have you got any remedies or answers to this sort of tension that's been described? I mean, if you're one of these visionary people, what can you do, if you like, to get more politically savvy or get more attention?
Well, I mean, firstly, be aware of the problem, and then I think find some people to model yourself on who are more, be more like them. Think about, well, who are these people? And you've got to really learn to adapt your behaviour and not just stay in your comfort zone. I think is the first thing to realise. Or I think most enterprise architecture groups do operate as a team. I mean, the things are sufficiently complex now, so get somebody in your team who's a bit more delivery focused and will chase things up.
We had a session last year about the name EA and how it fits, because I think a lot of people look to EA as being in IT, and part of turning it upside down, inside out, and back to front is maybe putting yourself in, with a different name. I've seen a lot of people talking about business architecture. I talk a lot about business design. I think business design as a term is easier sometimes for businesses to understand, and certainly, the struggles, within the EA community as to about what we're called, but you kind of become a chameleon. What goes, to your point about adapting, try and find out what language the person you're talking to in power is, and try and tune into that language in a way that they're going to accept more than.
That's a really good point. I mean, I think the language, people are extraordinary, and particularly executives, they're very fussy about words.
Yes.
And use them. So this airline I used to work for, it achieved a huge transformation in customer service, and the word vision was very popular. So we were all encouraged to have visions, and then you had a change of chief executive who hated the word vision. And suddenly visions went right out of fashion, and you had to find a different vocabulary to use. And it's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
That certain people, and then there was one particular, this new CEO thought that the IT department would fit better under the engineering department, which did not turn out to be a good move and didn't last very long. The engineering director was particularly fussy, and he didn't like the word input.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't like people saying, I want to put some input into this, because, I don't know, that just annoyed him. So you really got to tune into the language.
Interesting, yeah. How many EAs here are under the finance department somewhere? A few. And how many are under some CTO or engineering department or some sort of other case, sort of, yeah, a few less. Anyone else have, where do they point into? The board or?
CIO.
CIO. But, and onto the board. Okay. Yeah.
The idea we might change the name, I hesitate. It is the right name for what we need to do. So if we can't make that name work, changing the name isn't going to help.
Yeah.
It is exactly what we need to do. Okay. And we can make it work. We have models that make it work. So I would hesitate in thinking, well, it's not working. Let's change the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also that you don't need to talk about enterprise architecture.
That's true.
With the people you
Absolutely.
are going to help. You're going to facilitate them and help them make structure or make a transformation. You don't go up to them and say, hello, I'm going to do enterprise architecture for you. No, I'm going to help you with maybe some strategic guidance or some other change in stuff, or some end goal drawings or one pages telling how we should engage this change. So we don't have to preach our.
I think that's a great point, Casper.
Yeah.
You're the only one here, isn't a Brit.
Yeah.
So forget Brexit for the moment. Looking outside in from Denmark, and the discussions you've seen, is there a sort of Britishness about EA that you've observed, or is it a kind of a language that's universal across the worlds that you look at?
That was a tough one. I think that in Denmark, a lot of people is talking about enterprise architecture as a native word nearly now in Danish. But I think what works the best is that we talk about what we are going to achieve and then leave out our discipline.
Yeah, and when I work with people on the value proposition for enterprise architecture, let's not call it enterprise architecture and the value proposition. That's what we do. That is exactly what we do. We don't need to change the name for what we do. It's worth thinking about, if we can use metaphors for a minute. For Frank Gehry, he designs various shape buildings. He's an architect. He does architecture. But if you're in the pub with Frank Gehry and you say, well, I know you do architecture, what do you actually do? Then that is a useful metaphor for us to explain to other people, without losing the fact that we're architects, what we actually do.
Yeah, I say
And he would say-
enterprise navigation
Yeah.
because
He wouldn't say that, see? He
yeah,
wouldn't say that.
because
He wouldn't say that.
I think the map, I've heard a lot of geographical, I think the geographical metaphor is becoming more popular.
yeah.
Annika Kleiber, who did a workshop last year,
Yeah.
she talks about business geography.
Yeah.
And organisations are now so complex that actually people are quite like to have a map. And at the other end of the scale, in the software architecture world, Simon Brown, who's a really interesting guy championing the cause of software architecture and trying to get agile people to take an interest in software architecture and documenting it. He starts off his presentations with maps of Jersey where he lives, and he talks about you've got to be able to navigate your way around your code. You have to have a map.
I think it's very interesting. I mean, we've had different opinions, haven't we? I mean, Chris is saying, no, let's stick to EA, enterprise architecture. But in an earlier conversation, we're starting to talk about beyond the enterprise and looking at industries and industry architecture. I call some ecosystem architecture. I'm working on a problem with sustainability at the moment, and what's clear is that if we're going to manage waste properly in the next 20 to 30 years and sort out all the recycling problems we've got to think at the ecosystem or industry level. We can't no longer expect profit motive to drive the right behaviour. And so actually as a set of people who worry about the bigger picture, our bigger pictures are getting bigger and bigger. You're talking about navigation and different geographical ways to look at it. It's funny, the language is shifting and changing, and yet everyone wants to hold on to what they know as being the models that they know. So there's an interesting tension. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's a really good conversation. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question that doesn't last so long. Yes. The lady in black and white.
So my name is Jane Chang. I work for Centrica, and for better parts of Centrica, maybe you all know about British Gas more. I'm interested in the way, maybe how the panel actually explored the subject of disruptions in enterprise architecture. Because when we talk about enterprise architecture in the context of IT, infrastructure, business architecture, etc., we kind of think more very much inside the box. And even when we're looking outside the box, we're still thinking in the normal trend within the value chain, etc. Whereas if we look at Airbnb compared to a big hotel, since we're in a hotel environment, one can do as much as trying to improve how the hotel operation is. But if we actually want to escalate ourselves to the point where we can actually talk business strategy, I think the CEO probably is more worried about what is the disruption of Airbnb can do to the hotel rather than how to just improve the hotel estate and its enterprise architecture. So I'm actually very warm to what Chris has always been advocating on the investment side and the blind spot on the financial side. I just wonder how the panel actually feel we as enterprise architecture should move forward with the whole idea of startups and disruptions coming along from innovations and other.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah.
So Chris, anchor the question for the rest of us, and then we'll go to the rest of the panel, because you were referred to there.
Okay, so we think, because we'll have to wait and see, that a company like Airbnb has disrupted the architecture of the, whatever you want to call it, the hotel accommodation type market. I don't know what to call it now, because it's not hotel accommodation, but the market in which this... sorry?
Hospitality market.
Hospitality market. So we think it's disrupted the architecture of the hospitality market because it looks like it. Now, it might take a little bit while longer to find out if it actually has, because markets, they have architectures and they also have inertia, which means that to disrupt a market is possible, but not as easy as all that. Okay, and that's the same with enterprises, they have inertia. So disrupt the journey an enterprise is on is possible, but not as easy as all that. So we're going to have to wait and see if that's actually disrupted the hospitality market. But it looks like it might have done. But in the meantime, we have to scenario plan that it has, if you're in hospitality. So if you're in the gas supply market, I know that's one of the markets you're in. So somebody might come in, you've got a scenario plan, which is what we have to be good at as architects with other people. What might be disrupting the market architectures that we're in? And if that happens, what would we need to be doing so that we win? And then we do the rest of scenario planning. I won't bother with that. But that, if we're not being scenario planners together with other scenario planners, we are going to be stuck in some rigid world that we made when the rest of the world is actually changing around us.
I guess the question is, my CEO would be probably questioning, if you are such a good EA,
Yeah.
why didn't you think about the Airbnb proposal?
That's right.
Yeah. So
Together with other scenario planners, yeah.
It's getting closer to the business.
Well, that's what I mean, together with other scenario planners. It doesn't matter who thinks of it, somebody's got to think of it, then we can figure out how we win in that scenario if we're in the hospitality industry.
So Casper, we've got this tension. We've got this tension of...
Yeah, just the way you were formulating the
Yeah.
question in the second round here. I'm thinking as an EA in a company I've been in recently, I think the CEO, what he wants is the EA to enable the structures for innovation.
Yes.
Because disruption is something that is happening to your industry. And if you are disrupted, then that's bad, then it's over. But if you have, as an enterprise architect, if you can start building structures for innovation, and it can be very different in different types of businesses, because it's, I've seen a couple of things where people establish themselves outside the company and make kind of a new structure for innovating and maybe disrupting yourself or other markets. And I think as an EA, it's important to go into this area, because you can do so and so with the operation, but what about the future?
So thank you. We're running short of time, so I'm going to have to start to round out if that's okay. But Sally, on this point of disruption, from a people point of view, are EAs good disruptors? Do they have this challenging aspect that Jane is looking for, or characteristically are they different?
Well, it depends. Some of them are. I mean, some of the ones I've known are good at coming up with, have you thought about this kind of thing, and hanging about outside somebody important's door to try and nobble them in the corridor to say, have you thought about this? And if they've got the credibility. But I think the other thing we can do is we can be process facilitators as well. So if there's a problem out there, then you get, we're quite good at, or again, the good ones are good at saying, okay, let's get a bunch of people in a room and do a thinking sprint or something to say, and these are the elements of the problem that we ought to be thinking about. So I think the good ones will be able to construct a thought process that's appropriate to the problem, and have a structure in a discussion rather than people just getting in a room or getting in some very expensive management consultants who will tend to give you a cookie cutter thing that they gave to all the other companies they've spoken to.
And not perhaps challenge enough. Jane, final reflection on your question.
I think it's funny because currently I'm in the role, not having the title of enterprise architect, but I work in the exec office, and my boss basically said to me, I won't have anybody working for me unless they are from architecture. So I'm in a way very lucky to actually have somebody who is in a very senior level thinking that they need an architect to help them with strategic planning. So I think that all the panelists, what they say, have got value to think about as to providing an environment to innovate is, I guess, is important.
Yeah.
And brainstorming and getting the right people in to do the brainstorming has to be the way to go forward. And during that brainstorming, I think scenario planning will come into it, and perhaps we need to think about how we actually structure the process to do scenario planning in the future that is more tuned towards what is happening in the environment now, because everybody is talking about digital transformation. So all scenario planning, other than Brexit, the political factor, we have to do more about how we bring in technology to help scenario planning, and brainstorming perhaps is what I would be thinking of doing.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks.
All right, so thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time, as they say on quiz shows, and it's not a quiz show. So I'm going to ask each of the panellists to give one sentence in terms of a takeaway. So if you haven't been taking notes, you can take notes now, and then we'll wrap up. Chris, one sentence, takeaway.
Scenario. The market for enterprise architecture is being disrupted.
Thank you. Casper.
Okay, one sentence. Could we take Sally first?
Is that a sentence?
No, we're going to stick with you. Think on your feet, because that's what EAs have to do.
Okay, I think a company should try to drive change under the same guidance, so they can drive change together. It was kind of a messy sentence, but it was.
That's good.
I liked it.
Thank you.
I think, I go back to coherence. John over there, what was your book called? Coherency Management. I think we are the champions of enterprise coherence. We go around trying to find incoherence and stamp it out.
Interesting. One of the roles. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been a short session tonight. We're going to close now. The title, Turning EA Upside Down and Outside In and Back to Front, we've explored with some good stories. So thank you to the panellists, first of all. Thank you particularly for coming. Our AGM is going to be on the 13th of November. It's a Monday, so I hope some of you can come along, and if you feel excited by getting more involved with the BCS and the EA specialist group, do come along to the AGM and perhaps stand. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening.